The bass from the speakers pulsed through my chest as I stepped into the party. The house was packed, filled with the kind of reckless energy that comes when people drink just enough to forget their inhibitions but not enough to regret it. I wasn't in the mood for it. I had been drained all week from work, and honestly, I only showed up because Emily begged me to. She was excited about it. Too excited. She had been acting different for weeks. First, I thought it was stress. Then I thought maybe I had done something wrong. Some unspoken mistake she wouldn't admit, but was silently punishing me for. But then I caught the way she had been checking her phone, the way she started staying out late, the way she had been getting dressed up for places that never required that much effort before. I asked about it once, offhandedly, and she laughed it off. "It's nothing," she said. "I just like feeling good about myself." Tonight was different. I could tell from the moment we left the house. Emily had spent an hour picking out her outfit, which wasn't unusual, but the way she ignored me while doing it was. When she finally stepped out of the bedroom, I froze. The dress was short, tighter than anything she normally wore, and she smelled different. Not like her usual perfume, but something new, something expensive. "Jesus," I had said. "You're really going all out, huh?" She smirked. "It's a party. Don't be boring." And now here we were. The house was packed, laughter and music blending into a chaotic mess of sound. I grabbed a drink from the kitchen, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Emily had disappeared the second we walked in. Not unusual. She was always more social than me. But something felt off. I pushed the feeling away. I wasn't going to be that guy, the clingy, insecure husband hovering around his wife all night. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. I saw her once, across the room, laughing with a group of people I didn't recognize. She didn't even glance in my direction. I should have left then. I should have trusted my gut. Should have walked out before I saw what I saw. I moved through the crowd, searching for her, telling myself it was just to say hi, and then I saw her. She was in the corner of the living room, pressed against a man I didn't recognize. His hands were on her waist. Hers were resting against his chest, fingers lightly tracing over his shirt. Their faces were close, too close. It wasn't a friendly hug. It wasn't just a moment of drunken stupidity. It was deliberate, intimate, like they had done it before, like they knew exactly how this was supposed to go. My heart didn't race. It stopped. The air in the room felt too thick, too hot. Everything around me blurred except for them. Emily tilted her head, laughing at something he said, and then he leaned in, pressing his lips against her neck. And she let him. I could have stormed over, could have grabbed him by the collar, thrown him to the floor, demanded an explanation. I could have called her name, made a scene, let the whole party know what kind of person she was. But I didn't. I turned around and walked out. The cold air outside hit me like a slap. I barely noticed. My mind was racing, yet completely blank at the same time. My legs moved on their own, carrying me down the driveway, away from the house, away from her. I got in my car and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. Rage? Betrayal? Maybe I was supposed to cry, scream, punch the dashboard. But all I felt was nothing. A deep, hollow kind of emptiness that settled in my chest like a stone. I reached for my phone. Habit, I guess. My thumb hovered over Emily's name. What was I even going to say? "Hey, I just saw you all over some guy at a party. Hope you had fun." No, I wasn't going to be that pathetic. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and let out a slow breath. I needed to think. Instead of driving home, I went to a diner down the road, one of those places that never closes. It was nearly empty, just a couple of tired-looking truckers and a waitress who barely glanced up as I walked in. I slid into a booth, ordered a coffee, and stared at my reflection in the window. I had always considered myself a rational guy, someone who thinks before he acts, who doesn't jump to conclusions. But what I saw back there was no misinterpreting it. She wasn't drunk. She wasn't caught off guard. She wanted it. How long had this been going on? Had it just started? Or had I been a joke for months, maybe years? I thought about all the late nights, all the sudden changes, the way she had started treating me like an afterthought. Had she ever even felt guilty? Or was I just so blind, so stupid, that she never had to? The coffee was awful, but I drank it anyway. At some point, I pulled out my phone again. Not to call her. No, I wanted to see if she'd noticed I was gone. Maybe a text, a missed call, something. Nothing. Not a single message. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Wow, she hadn't even noticed. Or maybe she had and she just didn't care. I checked the time. Almost 2 in the morning. I had been sitting here for nearly 3 hours. Thinking, overthinking, trying to wrap my head around it. It was pointless. I needed to go home. The drive was quiet. No music, no thoughts. Just the sound of the tires against the road. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was already there. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Then I stepped out. Inside, the house was dark except for the soft glow from the living room. I heard movement, and then soft, muffled sobs. I turned the corner, and there she was. Emily, curled up on the couch. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her face buried in her hands. She looked up as I stepped into the room, eyes red and swollen. "Oh my God!" she choked out, standing up so fast she nearly tripped. "You're home." I said nothing. She took a shaky step forward. I thought something happened to you. Called you. I texted you 100 times. Why didn't you answer? My phone was still in my pocket. I pulled it out. No missed calls. No texts. I looked at her, and she knew. Emily's face changed in an instant. The fake concern, the crocodile tears, gone. Her lips pressed together, her eyes darted to my phone, and just like that, she knew she had screwed up. I said nothing. I just stood there, watching her scramble for an explanation. She started, but then stopped. She was calculating. I could see it in her eyes, the gears turning, searching for the right lie to get herself out of this. "What's wrong?" she finally asked, voice small, shaky, as if she didn't already know. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that didn't even feel like my own. "You're seriously asking me that?" Her jaw tightened. God, can you just talk to me? You disappear for hours, you don't answer your phone, and then you come home acting like this. Acting like what? I asked, tilting my head. Like a husband who just saw his wife all over some other guy at a party? Her face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. For a split second, just a fraction of a second, I saw the truth in her expression. The panic, the guilt, the realization that she had been caught. And then she switched tactics. "What the hell are you talking about?" she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Are you drunk or something?" I almost admired how quickly she recovered. Almost. I shook my head. "Don't do that. Don't insult my intelligence." She let out a sharp breath, rolling her eyes. "Jesus, you're being ridiculous. Who told you that? Mike? Because he's a freaking liar." "I saw you, Emily." The words cut through the room like a blade. Silence. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "I saw you with him. I saw the way you let him touch you. I saw the way you looked at him." She opened her mouth again, but nothing came. For the first time tonight, she looked truly caught. And then, as if flipping a switch, her expression hardened. "Oh, so what?" The words hit me like a slap. I blinked. "What?" She threw her hands up. "So what? You saw me talking to someone. Big deal. Are you really gonna stand here and act like I did something wrong when you just left me at a party with no explanation?" I laughed again, this time out of disbelief. "Are you out of your mind? I left because my wife was practically making out with another guy in front of a whole room of people." "You're being dramatic," she shot back, arms crossed. "I'm being dramatic?" I repeated. She scoffed, turning away from me like she couldn't be bothered with this conversation anymore. And that's when I realized something. She wasn't sorry. Not even a little bit. She wasn't crying because she felt guilty. She wasn't crying because she had hurt me. She was crying because she got caught. A slow, suffocating anger started creeping up my spine. "How long?" I asked. Emily stiffened. She didn't turn around. She didn't ask what I meant. She knew. "How long?" My voice was deadly calm. For the first time, she hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with defiance. "It's not what you think," she muttered. "Then tell me what it is." Silence. And that's when I knew. It wasn't just some drunk, careless mistake at a party. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was bigger than that. Emily turned around slowly, her eyes locking onto mine. And then, with the coldest voice I had ever heard from her, she said, "You're not entitled to every detail of my life." The room went dead quiet. Something inside me snapped. I stared at her, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. Not entitled to every detail of her life? My wife. The woman I built a life with. The woman who stood in front of me just minutes ago, pretending to be devastated over my absence. Now, she looked me dead in the eye and basically told me she didn't know me the truth. The rage that had been simmering beneath my skin erupted into something cold, sharp, dangerous. I took a slow step toward her. She didn't flinch. "That's an interesting response, Emily," I said quietly. Not, "It was a mistake." Not, "I love you, I'm sorry." I tilted my head. "You're just mad that I have the audacity to ask?" She scoffed. "Oh, don't turn this into some dramatic movie moment. You're acting like I murdered someone." I felt my hands curl into fists. "Keep calm. Don't give her the satisfaction of thinking she can get under your skin." "You're right," I said, voice even. "You didn't murder anyone. You just humiliated your husband in front of a house full of people. You just lied to my face and then gaslit me the second I called you out." Emily rolled her eyes. "God, you sound so pathetic right now." I froze. Pathetic. That word hit different. She knew exactly what she was doing, exactly which words would get under my skin the most. She wasn't panicking anymore. She was pushing me into a corner, hoping I'd explode, so she could turn this around and make herself the victim. And that's when I realized this wasn't new. This wasn't the first time she had played this game. How many times had I second-guessed myself in the last few months? How many times had I felt like something was off but let her convince me I was just imagining it? I stepped back, exhaling sharply through my nose. "Okay," I muttered, shaking my head. "I see how this is going to go." Emily crossed her arms. "Oh yeah? And how's that?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman in front of me wasn't the person I had married. Or maybe she was, and I had just been too blind to see it. I let out a bitter laugh. "You don't even like me, do you?" She blinked. The question caught her off guard. I continued, my voice quieter now. "You didn't cry because you were scared of losing me. You cried because you got caught." I gestured to her. "Look at you now. Not a single tear left." Emily's expression flickered, like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the right words. She didn't deny it. She couldn't deny it. I let out a deep breath and looked around the room, suddenly feeling like a stranger in my own house. I wasn't going to win this conversation. There was nothing left to say. Emily, however, wasn't done. "So what now?" she challenged. "Are you going to act all noble and dramatic? Pack your bags? Make a big scene?" She smirked. "You don't have the guts." I took another step back, watching her. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to break something. She wanted me to prove her right, to justify whatever story she had already started telling herself about how I was the bad guy in all of this. Instead, I just nodded. "All right," I said simply. Her smirk faltered. "What?" I turned away, walking toward the bedroom. "Where are you going?" she called after me, suspicion creeping into her voice. I didn't answer. I just opened the closet, grabbed my duffel bag, and started packing. Behind me, Emily let out a sharp laugh, short, disbelieving. "Oh my God, are you serious right now?" I didn't respond. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, essentials. I wasn't thinking beyond that. I just needed to get out of the house, away from her. I could hear her footsteps as she followed me down the hall. "Wow," she scoffed. "So that's it? You're just gonna run away like a little kid?" I zipped the duffel bag, slung it over my shoulder, and turned to face her. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, leaning against the frame like this was all some stupid joke, like I wasn't actually leaving. I looked her in the eyes. "You want me to stay?" Her jaw tensed, but she kept her expression neutral. "I want you to stop acting like a dramatic idiot." I laughed. "Right? Because I'm the dramatic one here." "You are," she shot back. "God, do you even hear yourself? You're throwing a tantrum over nothing." "Nothing," I repeated. "That's what you call cheating on your husband in front of a house full of people? Oh my God." She dragged a hand down her face like she was exhausted by me. You saw me talking to someone. That's it. I tilted my head. Right? Just like I imagined you staying out late all the time. Just like I imagined the way you started dressing up for errands. Just like I imagined the way you've been treating me like a burden for months. I stepped closer, my voice calm. Too calm. Funny how all those little things I was imagining led to me watching you let another man put his hands all over you. Emily scoffed. You're so insecure. It's embarrassing. There it was. The switch. The moment she realized she had no way out, so she turned to insults instead. I shook my head, exhaling sharply. You know what's embarrassing, Emily? You. Watching you scramble for excuses. Watching you try to flip this on me, like I'm the problem. Watching you smirk while your husband packs a bag to leave you. Her expression faltered, but she covered it quickly. You're not leaving. That caught me off guard. I frowned. What? She shrugged. You're not leaving, she repeated, like it was obvious. You're pissed, you're trying to prove a point, but we both know you won't actually go through with it. I stared at her. She smirked again. Where are you even gonna go? A hotel? Waste a bunch of money just to sit there and sulk? You'll be back by morning. The arrogance in her voice made my stomach turn. I realized something, standing there in that doorway. Emily wasn't scared. Not because she thought she did nothing wrong, but because she thought she had me trapped. She thought I wouldn't leave, that I couldn't, that I would throw my little tantrum, maybe crash on a friend's couch for a night, then come crawling back like I always did. And suddenly, I saw everything clearly. This wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't a mistake. She had been doing this for a long time, and she had gotten away with it because she knew I would never leave. Until now. I walked past her without another word, duffel bag over my shoulder. She didn't stop me. She just watched, arms still crossed, a smug little smile playing at her lips. I didn't look back. Not even when I reached the front door. Not even when I stepped outside. Not even when I heard her voice, soft and amused, calling after me. See you tomorrow. I closed the door behind me, and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe. The night air was sharp against my skin, but I barely felt it. I stood on the front porch for a second, my duffel bag weighing heavy on my shoulder, my mind replaying the last few minutes over and over again. See you tomorrow. She really thought I wouldn't go through with it. She thought she had won. I took a deep breath, exhaled, and walked to my car. I didn't even hesitate as I pulled open the door and threw the bag into the passenger seat. I started the engine, backed out of the driveway, and kept my eyes forward. I didn't check the mirrors, didn't give myself the chance to see if she was watching from the window, waiting for me to stop, to change my mind. I drove. I had no plan, no destination. I just needed distance, space, time to think without her voice poisoning my thoughts. The city lights blurred past me, and I felt like I was floating, disconnected from my own life. I didn't want to call anyone. Not yet. What would I even say? Hey, guess what? My wife's been cheating on me for God knows how long. And when I caught her, she acted like it was my fault. Also, she thinks I'm too much of a pathetic loser to actually leave. So, you got a couch I can crash on? Yeah. No. I needed a place to sit to clear my head. I found myself pulling into an all-night gas station. One of those rundown places with flickering fluorescent lights and a bored-looking cashier scrolling through his phone. I parked in a corner, away from the other cars, and just sat there. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. What the hell just happened? A few hours ago, I was just a guy going to a party with his wife. Now, I was a guy sitting in a gas station parking lot at 2 a.m. with a bag of clothes and no idea where to go next. I wanted to scream, or punch something, or rewind time and slap myself for being so stupid, so blind. How had I let it get this far? Had I really been that clueless? Or had I just been ignoring the signs because I didn't want to believe them? The memories started flooding in. The nights she came home late, smelling like a cologne that wasn't mine. The way she had stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. The new lingerie I never got to see her wear. I had convinced myself it was all in my head. That I was overthinking. That I was just insecure. No, she had made me feel that way. Every time I asked a question, she had brushed it off. Every time I tried to bring up my concerns, she had twisted the conversation, made me feel crazy, and I had let her. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel. I felt like a joke, a fool. And the worst part? Somewhere deep down, I knew that if she had just cried a little harder, if she had begged me to stay, I might have. That thought made me sick. The door to the gas station chimed as someone walked out, and the noise jolted me out of my spiral. I looked up, blinking, trying to ground myself. I needed a plan. I wasn't going back. That much was clear. But I couldn't just sit here all night. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over a name. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I hit call. It rang twice before a groggy voice answered. "Dude, it's 2 in the morning." I swallowed. "Yeah, I know." A pause. Then, "What happened?" I hesitated. My throat felt tight. Then, finally, I forced the words out. "I need a place to stay." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then, "Where are you?" The grogginess in my friend Jake's voice was gone. Just like that, he was awake, fully alert. That's the kind of guy he was. No unnecessary questions, no hesitation, just immediate action. I exhaled, running a hand down my face. Gas station off 14th. My voice faltered. I just left. Another pause. Then quieter, left? He didn't need to ask what I meant. Yeah. A sharp inhale from his side of the call. Then, "You good?" Was I? No, not even close. But I wasn't about to unravel over the phone. "I'll explain when I get there." "All right," Jake said, no further questions. "Come over." I'll leave the door unlocked. I hung up and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. My hands were shaking slightly as I put the car into gear. I had always been the rational one in my friend group. The guy who kept his cool, who gave level-headed advice, who never let emotions get the best of him. Right now, I felt like a loaded gun with the safety off. The drive to Jake's was short, but it felt like an eternity. My brain kept replaying the night in an endless loop. Emily's smirk, her arrogance. The way she knew I wouldn't leave and didn't even care if I did. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my jaw clenching. Not this time. Jake lived in a small apartment downtown. I parked outside, grabbed my bag, and walked up to his door. True to his word, it was unlocked. As soon as I stepped inside, Jake was already there, leaning against the kitchen counter in sweatpants and a hoodie, arms crossed, watching me carefully. I dropped the duffel bag onto the floor and exhaled. "Hey." He didn't say hey back. He just looked me up and down, then asked, "What did she do?" That was Jake. Straight to the point. No sugarcoating. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I felt like if I tried to speak, I might choke on everything at once. Instead of answering, I walked past him, into his small living room, and sank onto the couch. Jake followed, sitting in the chair across from me. He didn't push. He didn't demand answers. He just waited. Finally, I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. She was with another guy, at the party. Jake's expression didn't change, but I saw his hands tighten into fists. "You saw it?" I nodded. It wasn't even subtle, man. Hands all over each other. She didn't even care that people were watching. His jaw clenched. That's insane. I laughed again, but there was no humor in it. You know what the best part is? I leaned back, rubbing my hands over my face. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She just acted like I was crazy for being upset, like I was the problem. Jake let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "Dude," I packed a bag, I continued. Told her I was leaving. And she smirked at me. Told me I'd be back by morning. Jake sat forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "She said that? Like it was a joke." I exhaled sharply. Like she's been doing this for so long that she knows she can get away with it. Silence. Then Jake leaned back, shaking his head. "That's not just cheating. That's disrespect." I nodded slowly. "Yeah." "And I let it happen." Jake frowned. "No, she did this. This isn't on you." Maybe he was right. Maybe he wasn't. It didn't change the fact that I felt like an idiot. "You're not going back," Jake said firmly. "Right?" I hesitated. Not because I wanted to go back. Not because I still had hope for Emily. But because I didn't know what came next. I didn't have a plan. I don't know, I admitted. Jake sighed, rubbing his face. You need a lawyer. That word hit me like a brick to the chest. A lawyer. Because this wasn't just some bad fight. This wasn't just an argument that could be solved with apologies and time. This was the end. Jake must have seen something shift in my expression because he leaned forward again. Listen, man. You don't have to figure everything out tonight. Just sleep. Get some rest. We'll deal with it tomorrow. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Jake stood up, grabbed an extra blanket from the hallway closet, and tossed it onto the couch. You can stay as long as you need. Thanks, man. He gave me a small nod, then disappeared into his room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind a chaotic mess. Emily was probably asleep by now, completely unbothered. Maybe she thought she had won. Maybe she thought I was just cooling off and would come crawling back. But something in me had shifted tonight. I wasn't the same man who had walked into that party. And for the first time, I realized I never wanted to be that man again. Sleep didn't come. I lay on Jake's couch for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind a relentless storm of memories, anger, and disbelief. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's smirk, her arrogance, the way she had laughed in my face when I told her I was leaving. She thought this was temporary. She thought I'd crawl back. At some point, I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, sunlight was creeping through the blinds, and Jake was nudging my shoulder with a coffee cup in his hand. Morning, he muttered. Did you sleep at all? Not really, I admitted, rubbing my eyes. Figured, he said, handing me the coffee before plopping down into the chair across from me. So, what's the plan? That was the question, wasn't it? I stared into the cup, watching the steam rise. I don't know, I admitted. I don't even know where to start. Jake exhaled through his nose, nodding. Okay, let's make a list then. I looked up at him. A list? Yeah. A list. He grabbed his phone and started typing. First things first, you staying here for now? Yeah. If that's okay. He muttered. Second, are you filing for divorce? The word divorce felt foreign, like it didn't belong to me. But it did. It belonged to me now, whether I liked it or not. I swallowed. Yeah. Jake nodded. Good. That means you need a lawyer. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my face. I don't even know where to start with that. Don't worry about it. My sister's friend is a divorce attorney. I'll text her and see if she has recommendations. He typed something into his phone, then looked back at me. Next question. Are you going to the house to get the rest of your stuff? I hesitated. The thought of stepping back into that house, of seeing Emily again, made my skin crawl. But my entire life was still in that house. Clothes, documents, personal things I wasn't about to let her keep just because she assumed I wouldn't come back. I have to, I admitted. Not alone, Jake said immediately. I frowned. What? You're not going back there by yourself, he repeated. You think she's just gonna let you walk in and take your stuff? She's gonna try something. She'll cry. She'll beg. She'll twist it around. I won't fall for it, I cut in. Not the point, he countered. She thinks you will. She thinks she still has control over you, and the second she realizes she doesn't, she's gonna freak. I sighed. He wasn't wrong. Fine, I muttered. You coming with me? Jake grinned. Obviously. I took a sip of the coffee, letting the warmth settle in my chest, grounding me. Jake stretched, yawning. When do you want to go? Now, I said. He blinked. Damn. Okay. Let me throw on some pants. 15 minutes later, we were in my car, heading toward the house I no longer considered my home. I felt strange. Not anxious, not angry, just done. The shock, the heartbreak, the rage. It was still there, but it was buried under something stronger. Clarity. Emily had made her choices. Now I was making mine. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was there. Jake glanced at me. You ready? I nodded once. Let's get this over with. We stepped out. I didn't hesitate. I didn't knock. I unlocked the door and walked inside. Emily was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, scrolling through her phone. When she looked up and saw me, she smirked. The exact same smirk from last night. Well, she said, setting her mug down. That was fast. Jake stepped in behind me, crossing his arms. Emily's smirk faltered. I didn't give her time to start whatever manipulative speech she had planned. I'm here for my stuff, I said flatly. That's it. She raised an eyebrow, standing slowly. Oh, so what, you're really doing this? Just packing up and leaving like a little coward? Jake let out a low whistle. Wow, that's the strategy you're going with? Bold. Emily ignored him, folding her arms as she turned back to me. You're being ridiculous. I didn't answer. I just walked past her, straight to the bedroom. Behind me, Emily huffed. Seriously? You're not even gonna talk to me? Jake leaned against the counter, watching her like she was a bad sitcom. What's there to talk about? You cheated. You got caught. He left. Pretty straightforward. Emily's jaw clenched. This is none of your business. Jake raised an eyebrow. Oh, now you want privacy? That's funny, considering you were real comfortable making out with some dude in front of 30 people last night. Emily's eyes flashed with something sharp. Screw you. Not interested, Jake said casually. I barely heard them. I was too focused on packing, grabbing every single thing that mattered. Emily stormed into the bedroom, stopping just inside the doorway. You're being insane, she snapped. You're throwing away everything over a misunderstanding. I turned to face her. A misunderstanding? She scoffed. Yes. You saw one thing and ran off like a dramatic idiot instead of actually talking to me. I did talk to you, I cut in. You laughed at me. You told me I wasn't entitled to details about your life. And now that you realize I'm actually leaving, suddenly it's a misunderstanding? I shook my head. Unbelievable. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, she looked unsure. Panicked. Good. I turned back to my bag. You don't have to do this, she said suddenly, voice softer now. Desperate. Please. I kept packing. Please, she repeated, stepping closer. We can fix this. We don't have to throw everything away over a mistake. I turned back to her, cutting her off with 3 words. You threw it away. Her breath hitched. Jake clapped his hands together. Welp, that's game. Let's wrap this up. I zipped the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked past her without another glance. Jake followed. As I reached the front door, Emily called after me one last time. If you walk out that door, don't come back. I didn't even pause. I walked out, and this time I didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind me, cutting off whatever else Emily might have said. I stood there for a second, bag slung over my shoulder, the morning air crisp against my skin. A few feet away, Jake leaned against my car, arms crossed, watching me with an unreadable expression. Then, without a word, he grinned. Dude, that was brutal. I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders, feeling the tension finally start to drain from my body. Yeah. You good? I exhaled, looking back at the house, the place that had been ours, the place I had once called home. I waited for something to hit me. Regret. Sadness. Doubt. But it didn't come. Instead, there was just quiet, like my mind had finally stopped screaming, like I could finally hear myself think again. I turned back to Jake. Yeah, I said. I think I am. He clapped me on the back. Hell yeah. Now let's get the hell out of here before she throws your stuff onto the lawn or sets your car on fire or some other psycho move. I snorted. Wouldn't put it past her. We got in the car, and as I pulled out of the driveway, I could see movement in the window. Emily standing there, watching us go. Still, I didn't look directly at her. Didn't give her the satisfaction. Jake stretched out in the passenger seat, sighing dramatically. So what now? You gonna go full midlife crisis? Buy a motorcycle? Move to Thailand? Shave your head and become a monk? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Step 1 is finding a lawyer. Step 2 is finding an apartment. Jake nodded. Solid plan. And step 3? I thought about that for a moment. What was step 3? For the longest time, my life had revolved around Emily. Our plans. Our future. Even when things had started to go downhill, I had still been clinging to the idea of us, of fixing things, of getting back to what we used to be. But that was gone now. For the first time in years, I wasn't planning around someone else. It was just me. I glanced at Jake. Step 3 is figuring out who the hell I am without her. He smirked. Now that sounds like a plan. The rest of the drive was quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running in circles in my own head, trying to figure out what I had done wrong, what I could fix, how I could make things better. Because the truth was, this wasn't something I could fix. And I wasn't supposed to. Emily had made her choices. And now I was finally making mine. Jake's apartment was small, but it felt bigger than my own house. Maybe because there was no weight pressing down on my chest, no second-guessing myself before every conversation, no silent tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. I dropped my bag in the corner and sank onto the couch. Jake grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, tossing one to me before sitting down across from me. "For the record," he said, twisting off the cap, "I don't think you need to figure out who you are. I think you just need to remember." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" Jake shrugged. "You've spent so much time trying to make Emily happy, trying to fit into her world, that you forgot what you actually wanted. Who you were before she started messing with your head." I took a sip of my beer, letting his words sink in. Had I really changed that much? I thought back to when we first got together. I had hobbies. I had ambitions. I had friends I actually saw more than once every few months. Over time, all of that had faded. Not because she forced me to change, but because I had made myself smaller. I had adjusted to her expectations, molded myself into whatever version of me she found acceptable. And the worst part? Even after all of that, I still hadn't been enough. I exhaled, shaking my head. "That's depressing as hell." Jake smirked. "Yeah, but the good news? You don't have to be that guy anymore." That thought settled in my chest like a slow-burning fire. I didn't have to be the guy constantly walking on eggshells, wondering if I'd said the wrong thing. I didn't have to be the guy desperately trying to hold onto a relationship that was already dead. I was free. It was a strange realization, almost scary. But under the fear, there was something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Jake frowned. "You expecting someone?" I wasn't. And then, like a bad horror movie twist, I knew. "Emily." Jake saw the realization hit me and groaned. "No way." I set my beer down and stood up, rolling my shoulders. "Let's get this over with." Jake held up a hand. "Hold on. Are we thinking calm conversation? Or, tell her to go to hell?" I smirked. "Little bit of both." Jake grinned. "Love that for you." I walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. There she was. Emily stood in the hallway, arms crossed, looking pissed. Not heartbroken, not desperate, just angry. Like I was the one who had betrayed her. She let out a sharp breath. "Are you serious?" I leaned against the doorframe. "About what?" "Running away like this," she snapped. "Hiding out at your friend's place like some dramatic teenager instead of talking to me." I tilted my head. "You mean like how I tried to talk to you last night, and you laughed in my face?" Emily's jaw clenched. I was upset. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You were caught." Her eyes flashed with something sharp. "You are blowing this way out of proportion." Jake's voice came from the couch. "Do you even hear yourself?" Emily ignored him, stepping closer. "Look, I know you're mad. I know you feel betrayed." I let out a slow breath. "Emily, I don't feel betrayed. I was betrayed." Her eyes flickered. "Okay," she said slowly, like she was speaking to a child. "But that doesn't mean we have to throw away everything." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak, no longing for what we used to have. Just exhaustion. "You already threw it away," I said. "And honestly, I think you know that." Emily swallowed. I don't understand how you can walk away so easily." "Easily?" I let out a short laugh. "You think this is easy?" Her lip trembled. For a split second, I thought she might actually cry. But then, just as quickly as the vulnerability appeared, it vanished. Her expression hardened. "Fine," she said coldly. "Do whatever you want. But don't come crawling back when you realize you made a mistake." I smiled. "You first." She inhaled sharply like she was about to say something else, then turned on her heel and stormed off. I closed the door. Jake let out a low whistle. "Damn, that was beautiful." I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck. "I feel like I just finished the world's worst final exam." He grinned. "Well, good news, you're officially graduated from Emily's BS. And that calls for another beer." I chuckled, shaking my head as I sat back down. I didn't know what came next. I didn't have everything figured out. But for the first time in a long, long time, I was finally looking forward to finding out.